Burnhams, and me and my wife are about to set out to make our own tiny house, which we expect to live in for the next 2 years.
A documentary about the tiny house movement about 2 years ago, which was mostly filmed in the States, and I was really interested in it at the time, and I really liked the concept, but it seemed like a completely impossible idea for me because I had no building experience or know-how for how you would even start making your own house. But then it came up again when we started looking at flats to rent in preparation for after we got married, and seeing how extortionately expensive the rent was in all of the potential flats we could live in. And so a friend posted a link to a tiny house website on Facebook saying, oh, why don't you look into this? And I still had heard about it and thought that would be great, but it seemed like an impossible idea. But Adam saw the link on Facebook.
So that was probably the first time I'd seen the link, and I spent a short while just looking at the numbers, comparing the cost of rent to the cost of making a tiny house, and very quickly came to the conclusion that it would be financially better to make a tiny house as long as we lived in it for 2 years. And so that then was quite a quick and easy decision to make.
Yes.
Yes, in part, but obviously it's not the only solution, particularly for people with children or large families. It wouldn't be practical, but for single people or for those who are couples without children, I think it is definitely a response.
And there's lots of other ways that the tiny housing movement appeals to people. So it is partly for those who can't afford to rent or to buy their own house because the property market is so expensive now. But there's also a big appeal to a lot of people who want to simplify their lives or downsize a bit. So having less possessions and less stuff to have to worry about, less maintenance on their bigger houses or something like that. We haven't finished buying our materials yet, so we're basing our estimate on what others have spent, which is around about £12,000. But because we're making more of our tiny house from scratch, we think ours shouldn't cost more than that and might possibly cost less. So £12,000 maximum is our budget for it. How long it will take? We had a very ambitious estimate of 2 to 3 months from Adam. Realistically, we've already been planning for a month because the planning and designing has actually been quite laborious and there's been a lot to think about. So we haven't started building yet, and I would imagine there'd be at least another 4 or 5 months of building time after our month of planning.
I would say that there's only another 3 months to go, but it's very hard to know for sure because neither of us has done anything like this before, and we are making a lot of things from scratch, whereas those who buy in pre-made windows and doors, it would save a lot of time. We're even paying to build our own sofa, which will give you an idea of the sort of amount of time it would take compared to buying these things.
Depends a lot how much goes according to plan, because there's some things we won't know what problems we might encounter, so those things could make it take longer. But we do have the advantage that Adam already has a workshop with all of the tools that we need and a really good space to use, so that should make it quicker for us than for most people. Our main benefit that made us want to pursue it was not having to embark on getting a mortgage or paying rent and having to go through all of the lengthy checks that the different rental companies enforce on you. So it seems like a really attractive possibility to be able to start married life without lots of debts or really expensive bills to pay every month. And that prospect of being able to own our own house from the outset was just really exciting.
The other advantage is without a mortgage, you're a lot more freed up to move somewhere else in the future, or even to sell it and then go on to rent somewhere or take out a mortgage if you desire it. So for us, we plan to live in it for 2 years, and after that, we could easily then move on to something else. And even if we didn't manage to sell it, it would still be cheaper. So selling it would be like a bonus. So yeah, the freedom to be able to change your housing situation easily.
And I guess for us, it was really a more out of necessity thing. So for a lot of people, when they might just be moving out of home, or they might just have got married and be looking to have a place of their own to live, there's no way that they'd be able to have a place of their own, whether they're renting or buying it, a single salary, even with just Adam's salary, which is a reasonable salary for a person of our age, that would only just have been enough to prove to the rental companies that we could pay our bills every month. And so for others, if they're on their own looking to move into a place, they might not have a salary that's sufficient, and for them it'd be very difficult to be able to secure somewhere to live. So I'd say for a lot of young people looking to have somewhere to live, it could be a really attractive option. We'll find out.
Possibly. I would have thought that it's a bit of a sink or swim situation where either living in a small environment would kind of force you to get to know each other very well and would be therefore very positive, or it could be a situation where if people need a bit of space to try and work things out, it could put pressure on that makes things difficult. We're optimistic for us that it would be a positive thing as we're just married, and force us to work through living together in quite a kind of intensive way.
The more challenging thing has been to work together all the time, and that will be continuing as we start building the tiny house. We'll be together obviously all the time, so whether that's designing it or building it, that's something for us to get used to. But probably thinking about the future, one of our reasons we don't want to live in a tiny house forever is that we do want to be able to be more hospitable and have people over a lot more. And we've designed our tiny house so that it does allow for that, and we will be able to have guests very easily. But long term, we would like to have more space. So obviously a tiny house is limited in how many people you can fit in. But we'll still have our dog. And there are people who live with their children in a tiny house. We've come across people who live with their Great Dane and their daughter in a tiny house. So it is possible.
The main thing is that by building it yourself, it makes you very aware of where things have come from and what the impact on the environment is for using a particular product or building in a certain way. So it kind of suddenly puts that responsibility into your own hands, I guess. Of course, someone could build a really unsustainable tiny house, but it also gives us the opportunity, as we want to build something that has a good impact or little impact onto the environment. And in fact, in some ways, you can actually go further than just reducing your impact by actually helping the environment. So, for example, in our walls, we're going to use an insulation that uses newspaper, and by using up newspaper, you're actually helping environmentally by taking essentially carbon and keeping it as carbon rather than releasing it as carbon dioxide. So, yeah.
It also forces us to be quite aware of our energy usage. So we're planning to be completely off-grid, so we can site our house anywhere and not have to have an electric hookup or access to mains water. And that means we'll be running our house exclusively off of solar panels that we'll have on the roof, and we'll also have a log burner for heating. And then we'll use some propane gas canisters to supply our hot water and also our oven. And having to think that all through, we have very limited energy. We can't just have lots of appliances in our house, but we have to consider, we've made a list of everything that we might use and how much energy that's going to take and whether or not we can justify having those things in our house. So obviously for most people living in a normal house with unlimited access to energy, you wouldn't have to consider those things.
And obviously the big one is then where our materials come from. So there's two sides to that, whether the material itself is sustainable. So most of the time we're using timber, so for the framework is all timber, and then the cladding itself, which comes from sustainably farmed sources. The other side is then how far those materials are transported, and so buying timber that's our frameworks from Europe, so it's closer than obviously the US or other places, and our cladding is actually English cedar. So by choosing to use timbers that are locally sourced, it obviously reduces the environmental impact of transporting the materials. And
we've also had to think through things like the plumbing of our house and where all of our waste will go. So we've chosen to have a composting toilet in our tiny house, which means obviously we don't have to be part of any sewage systems, but we can actually use all of our waste and compost that and use that constructively for growing food and returning to the soil. So it's a really nice way to manage all of your inputs and your outputs, I suppose, and have different ways of reusing or recycling everything that we're inputting into our house, whether that's burning rubbish or recycling rubbish or composting our waste and having a composting toilet.